So today I want to talk about the topic of DLC characters, specifically in Guilty Gear, but also just generally in fighting games. In Guilty Gear, there's kind of this ongoing meme in the community, I think, where most DLC characters, when they release, they just tend to not be very great. So I want to talk about why I think that's the case and kind of why they've gone with that direction with their DLC characters, and just kind of talk about DLC characters in fighting game history. Because I think when you think about that and how DLC characters usually go over in fighting games, it's kind of more apparent why they do what they do with the DLC characters in Guilty Gear. So if you look over the history of the characters that we have gotten in this game, most of them have released not so great. Starting with Gold Lewis, he was probably better in hindsight than we maybe gave him credit for because his offense was incredibly powerful on release. However, he was probably still not very good. A character like Jacko was not very good on release. You have characters like Biken, Testament, Sin, and now the newest character that has not really hit most of the marks, being Bedman. A lot of the DLC characters in this game launch in not so great of situations, and oftentimes feel like they're just missing parts of their kit. And I definitely get why that's, disappointing for a lot of people. You kind of want the new characters to come out and be fun and meta relevant, feel like they're making an impact on the game. But very often the times in this game, characters come out and we just kind of forget about them a week after. A lot of the times people think that this is kind of just by accident, that ArcSys isn't trying or that they keep messing up or whatever. I personally think that this is a very intentional thing on their end. I think they intentionally release characters in kind of a underpowered state. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, because here's the thing that you want to think about, right? If you had to pick between releasing a character in an underpowered state where you could just easily buff them later down the line, after understanding how the character functions and maybe what the character actually needs. Or if you had to choose and make a character overpowered on release and be very toxic and unhealthy for the game, which would you choose? Because the one DLC character that I didn't talk about quite yet is Happy Chaos. Happy Chaos, when he came out, in hindsight, was definitely the best character at the time, and he was very unhealthy for the game. He honestly ruined that version of the game almost entirely. He probably beat most of the cast 7-3, if not worse. He was just a very volatile character for the meta of the game. So if you had to ask yourself, would you rather release Bedman or Happy Chaos? I feel like it's pretty obvious which one you would like to choose. At the end of the day, we are in a time of fighting games where we get patches somewhat frequently, and I think that with that in mind, it makes more sense to release characters kind of underpowered, because you can just buff them down the line. I'm sure for most of these characters, they already had a good idea of what would be underpowered about them, and there was probably a version of that character that had those things already to begin with. So they plan to just put the character out there, see what people think about them, and if they do need buffs, they give them the appropriate buffs. Most of these characters in Strive that were DLC characters released, not so strong, but if you look at pretty much all of them now, they're all quite strong. Characters like Gold Lewis, Jacko, Testament, Biken, they are all quite good at this point, and most of the DLC characters that aren't good, being Sin and Bedman at this point, just haven't been out long enough to actually be a part of a balance patch. Even Bridget is kind of the latest DLC character to get the DLC buff treatment, right? Everyone's kind of aware of it now, where there's kind of this cycle of releasing a character, they're not so great, they get buffed down the line, and then they're fantastic. And yeah, I think this makes sense to do, because if you look at the history of DLC in other fighting games, there are many cases of DLC characters being very polarizing, I would say. Oftentimes, DLC characters release and they are very strong, if not some of the best characters in the game. To some extent, sometimes DLC characters come out and they are the topic of, should this character be banned, right? Characters like Kokonoe and BlazBlue, characters like Tanya in Mortal Kombat. You have Luke over in Street Fighter V, which has been meta-defining as a character in that game. It is a common problem that has happened in a lot of fighting games, and I think that for Guilty Gear, they are trying very much to avoid that. Ended up failing because they put up, Happy House in the game. But for the most part, I think they're trying to avoid that. Ultimately, I think the DLC characters all still accomplish the goal of being fun and unique characters. They all play pretty differently from other characters that are in the cast for the most part. And if they're just going to get buffed later down the line, I think that's fine. It gives ArcSys the chance to really see what these characters are capable of and see how people feel about them and then change them accordingly. The big thing about DLC characters that I think is very important to remember is that because they are characters that are released after the game comes out, it means that the developers are able to more accurately judge what the character needs and what is maybe wrong with the character. When a fighting game is new, when they're just kind of releasing out into the wild, there is no way to really tell how your fighting game is going to be played, how it's going to shake up, what characters are going to be where. It kind of makes sense that oftentimes DLC characters in fighting games tend to be better than some of the launch characters because the developers understand their game better at that point. So because of that, I think that also makes sense why they kind of leave the characters a little bit undertuned on release. Yeah, there's some other common trends with the Strive DLC characters, right? There's the meme of the DLC 2K characters like Testament, Jacko, Happy Chaos. They all have those fast, low-profile 2Ks. The DLC characters are also kind of known for having more toxic game plans, I guess, so it kind of also makes sense they would maybe not want them to be super great. You have characters like Gold Lewis, Happy Chaos, Jacko, who have all very, uninteractive offense. Even like Bridget kind of falls into that as well. And even a character like Bedman. Bedman is considered not very great so far. Most people, I think, have settled on it being a low-tier character. But you can see the kind of the blueprint for a very volatile, toxic type of character there as well. So this is all just to say that, like, I understand kind of the frustrations of a character coming out and not being good. Everybody wants the new thing in the game to be exciting and relevant. I do think that if you have to err on the side of caution, it does make sense to do that, because the last thing we want is a game full of happy chaoses, right? If you have to pick between a bad character and a character that ruins the game, I think it's pretty obvious which one you should choose. Of course, we would all love these new characters to just fall right in the middle, but getting a character to be perfectly balanced on release is honestly a miracle, because again, you have no idea what people are going to find. You have no idea how things are going to develop. So I think it's honestly better to decide on just aiming for the character to be on the weaker side and then buffing them down the line, because we have the technology to do that now. That said, of course, I am curious to know what you guys think. Let me know in the comments below. How do you feel about the DLC characters in Strive? Do you like how they've been handling them? Do you feel like they've been unique? Are you frustrated with how they're balanced very often? Do you feel like maybe they should try to push the envelope a little bit more and release them in a stronger state? Let me know what you think about all of them in the comments below. Of course, if you do enjoy the video, please drop a like and consider subscribing. It really helps me out. I'm trying to grow the YouTube channel, so I would appreciate it very much. Thank you. Anyways, that's going to do this for this one. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.